What does it look like to be deeply rooted in Christ in a world of cultural chaos? Welcome to the Equip Podcast. I'm Mark Vance, the lead pastor at Cornerstone Church of Ames, and each week we want to look at core biblical truths that will equip you to live a life of faithfulness, to be salt and light wherever Jesus has called you.
All right, Emily Jensen here. I am back with Mark Vance.
Hi, guys.
And we are jumping into the Fifth Commandment today because on Sunday, you unpacked a lot about what it means to honor parents.
There's a lot there. It's way more than just children obey mom and dad when you're little.
Yes.
It's way bigger.
Way more. And it opens up all of these other questions about authority structures, about what exactly it looks like to honor parents at different ages and stages. So I want to press into some of that a little bit further today.
Guide us anywhere you want, Emily. I'm ready to go.
Well, one observation I've noticed is that in general, it seems like our culture is pretty cynical and even hostile towards the idea of authority structures. You know, there's just kind of a mood about
For sure.
Government or, the school board, the police force, parents actually holding their kids accountable to obey. That is considered taboo and mean,
sure.
even in Christian circles. So why do you think that is? Do you notice that mood? And what's that from?
Okay, well, you have a bunch of roots to this. So let's just briefly try to draw the intellectual architecture here. First off, our first parents, Adam and Eve, like the original sin.
We're going back to Genesis. Okay,
right,
great.
The original sin of humanity is we have an authority who is good and sets up limits for our good and flourishing. And we go, no, we would like to be like God, knowing good and evil, running our own world. So to think that humans have an instinct to rebel against authority is as old as humanity. But in particular, Western culture, American culture, you have a couple things that come in. We are products of the Enlightenment and the American kind of emphasis of the Enlightenment that comes out of there, which places a stress on the individual and reason over against traditional structures of authority. Okay, so we come out of that. America is birthed by a declaration of independence, where we throw off the shackles of, no taxation without representation, sort of British monarchist authority. And so you have it woven into the American idea that we're a nation of independent people. But I think the particular roots of the modern, and I think you could for sure call it postmodern or post-structuralist way to see this is the 1960s sexual revolution. We're throwing off the typical authority structures of how sexuality, marriage, relationships, gender work. And that's the age of the anti-establishment, right? We're anti-government, we're anti-war, we're anti-everything. That is a seminal movement in American culture, and it starts the ball rolling toward the age of the individual, right? Where I'm the determiner of what I want to see as truth. I define my identity myself. I speak it, and I expect the culture around me to celebrate it. So now, not the institution of the family or the church or the government is the center for who I am, but I am who I say I am, and you all better line up and agree to it. So that lays the seedbed for an anti-authority age. And then now we have the promotion of not just media, but social media. And social media, the gotcha story that exposes an authority that before you thought was morally good, but actually is morally bankrupt and abusive, is like the biggest story in the world. It's the expose on the podcast. It's the thing that rolls out on. And so what's happened is the abuse scandals, the Catholic Church abuse scandal, abuse of authority. So what happens is we live in an age that not only has no authority figures, we live in an age that has no heroes. Think of all of our movies, Emily. We don't have the Christopher Reeves Superman who is able to both leap over a building in a single bound, but also who is just a moral paragon of virtue. No, our Superman's conflicted, Okay? So none of our heroes are pure. So we want to tell the dark side of everything. And so what's happened is maybe in the past, there was an emphasis that authority is always good, and we might have had instances where we're overstating how good authority is. But in the present, because we've told so many stories about the abuse of authority, we assume the idea of authority is itself abusive. That, I think, is the era and the age in which we live.
Yeah, that is an incredible explanation. So there's more we could dive into there, but I want to touch on next the fact that God created us
for sure.
for ordered relationships, for hierarchy in all different
All
spheres
over the place, yeah.
of life. So maybe talk us through why that's actually a good thing. I mean, kind of right similar to the 10 Commandments series title about true freedom, right? We think commands and rules, that's not freedom, that's slavery. And we're saying actually obeying what God says and living according to his ways is the most free you're ever going to be. So what does that mean for ordered relationships?
Ordered relationships are woven into the essence of the universe because they're woven into the essence of God. God exists forever in an ordered relationship in the Trinity, right? Where the Son is underneath and following the authority of the Father in the Spirit, the Father and the Son, mutually submitting to one another in love, where they are of the same value and worth as beings ontologically, but they are ordering themselves in a relationship of submission. That's part of how Paul even talks about the ordering of the relationship in the home, where a husband is called to lead a wife. He'll make an appeal to God's design, but also to God's nature, just as the Son is following. Okay, so God is a being who has authority structures actually built into his essence in the Trinity. So when God, in the overflow of delight out of his Trinitarian nature, creates everything, he creates beings who are in his image. And then he orders us. He literally says, you, image bearers, will rule over all of the earth. So there's an ordered structure of authority.
Yeah.
The creation itself is under the authority, not just of the creator, but of the image bearers of the creator. And then God structures, particularly Christian theologians have talked about the three major structures of authority in the family or the home, the church, and then the government. The old language of the Westminster Divines was the Commonwealth. So there are civil authorities, governmental, there are church authorities, and then there are familial authorities. And underneath each side of those, there are people who are in superior positions, the positions of authority. So in a home, it could be the parent to the child. It could be a husband with his wife. That, again, not implying anyone in those authorities is of a lesser value, but that there are different orders and different, therefore, like virtues and expectations of what the person in that relationship would do. The point that I'm making is that that's not a flaw brought about by sin. That is a design feature brought about by God's command. So it's not that the sin curse brings in ordered authorities. It's that, no, those are the design feature of the ordered universe that flows out of the nature of an ordered God. And so this is, I think, a trademark even of how the American experiment is conceived to work, that we're a nation that's built on the foundation of ordered liberties. Ordered liberties, not anarchist freedom, but ordered freedoms, that a morally instructed and religiously instructed populace would have the mechanism of self-government to therefore flesh out in an ordered liberty structure. And so I just think This goes to, it's part of the concern I have. Anytime you have an age like we have, where, Emily, people are like protesting or rebelling, remember, protest movements only have a destructive power, not a constructive power. They can tear apart a broken system, but a protest movement in its nature does not have a power to construct a positive moral framework on the other side. Okay, so what's happening is, if you want to tear apart a society, what you do is you tear apart its authority structures without an alternative that you're proposing on the other side. You want to tear apart the family? What do you want to put in its place? Okay, so when we have a revolt against authority, the problem is what we have on the other side. And on the other side, we don't have it in our current social structure that's going to tear apart a lot of these ordered authorities. I don't see a persuasive proposal that makes sense of the nature of a human being on the other side of it. So we're made in ordered authorities because God is an ordered authority, and those are part of the design feature, not a flaw.
Yeah, it does sometimes feel kind of like, oh, but that's so mean. Like, why would he put that? But it's really not. And I know in the women's group, we've been studying the book of Titus, right? And one of the things Paul is writing to Titus to do is to establish order in the church at Crete. And so one of the very first things he does is say, you need overseers. You need elders who are going to be in charge. And I think one of the beautiful things is that in establishing this authority within the church, he's also establishing a high degree of moral character that's expected of those leaders. So I know that's something that helps me, even like as a wife to a husband, of like, well, my husband is also under authority.
Correct.
Right? There's elders are submitting to Christ. Like, hopefully there's a plurality. So I think it's just helpful for someone who's like wanting to buck against that to know, like, no one is like free of authority and like literally just, I'm going to do whatever I want. We all are held to a high degree, a high standard of obedience to Christ.
This is okay. Emily, think about the nature of the Ten Commandments. Who's the Ten Commandments written to? The Ten Commandments written to the people of Israel, but it's inside the Torah, the law of Moses. The king was instructed to hand copy the law of Moses for himself, because in Israel, the king was not the authority. The law was the authority. The king was subordinate to the law code. That, by the way, is different from other ancient Near Eastern law codes. The Code of Hammurabi wrote the code, but he was above the code. The king was the law. In Israel, the law was the king, because God was the king, ruling his people by his word through the intermediate authority of the king, the government, right?
And the law doesn't show partiality.
It doesn't show partiality.
To the one guy who's in charge at that time.
Exactly. So that in Israel, if David takes Bathsheba as his wife and kills Uriah, he's guilty even though he's the king. Okay, so the distinction there is in God's ordered authorities, every authority exists underneath God's authority.
Right.
We are ruled by his word. So we don't have authority run amok. We have authority under authority. And we also have, in God's ordered world, a lifting up of the inferior to the superior every single time. Okay, so I'm going to press on this just a little bit. When we talk about ordered authorities, we have those superior. I'm saying not that's the person with the authority. The inferior, the person who is to follow that authority. By the way, if you're watching us, you just may have noticed that the camera shot, there is no longer a beautiful picture. There's just some 3M tabs on the wall. And that's because our picture just fell in the middle of our conversation here. And so through the miracle of editing, this conversation will feel fairly smooth, but just know if Emily and I appear jostled, it's because...
I see, like my adrenaline is like rushing now because of the huge crash. But we're good.
We're good. Nothing shattered. And we're talking about authority structures. Okay, so Emily, what we were talking about here is inside of God's world, one of the things to note about Christianity that's unique is that inside of a Judeo-Christian worldview, when we talk about authority, there aren't just duties from the people underneath the authority, like what we owe in obedience. There are duties for those in authority, what we would call the superiors to the inferiors. So let's go through a few of them. Ephesians 6, children, obey your parents in the Lord, doesn't end with only a command to children, which is what you'd find in traditional Greco-Roman literature. Instead, it ends with fathers, don't exasperate your children. That's unique. Christianity is lifting up. It's paying attention to the person at the lower status point, not just the person at the higher. Husbands are told to lead their wives. Wives submit to the husband. But it says to the husband, husbands, by the way, you have to lay your life down for your wife. That's unique. Okay, slaves to masters. Slaves, obey your masters. You're going to see that in any Greco-Roman law code. What you won't see is, but masters, you are under the same master as a slave, and you report to him, the master in heaven above. Even, you mentioned Titus. In women's Bible study, we're seeing in Titus that Paul sets elders in charge in every town in Crete. But then he also says not just the men who are to be the elders, but we need older women to instruct the younger women. And in so doing, he addresses the women of the church, which would be almost absent in any address in synagogue life. Okay, so the point that I'm making there is God has designed a world with authority structures, but every authority that exists is underneath God's authority and has to submit to him. And so part of what Christianity does to dignify the people in the inferior position is to order both sides of that authority relationship for the good and flourishing of both people. So there's a little application of the Ten Commandments and the honoring your parents.
Yeah, that's really helpful to think about. Again, the honor and the dignity, and just the fact that God sees the person in the inferior position. And again, he's not showing partiality, and there's still a high degree of expectation for what love looks
Absolutely
like
right.
towards that person. I wanted to press a little bit deeper into what it looks like to honor parents at different ages and stages.
Yeah, we unpacked a bunch of that.
Yes,
Yep.
there's a lot of technical questions that come up about that. But again, speaking to the mood of the moment in our culture, right now, it is abnormal for parents to say, you have to obey me.
Oh, yeah.
And that there's not an option. I think that, we're coming out of maybe a little bit, but have moved through that gentle parenting era of, hey, we need to understand developmental ages and stages. I know I saw a video came across my Instagram feed the other day that said it is near child abuse to tell a child they're a sinner. Like, if you present the gospel to your child in that way,
Wow.
you are making them feel like a terrible person, that they're going to burn in hell if they don't believe in Jesus. What kind of Christian parent monster would say that? And I was just like, oh dear, we can't tell children the gospel anymore. Certainly there's an appropriate way to present it that's not fear-based, but this is the stew that we're living in.
Oh, yeah.
So why don't you walk us through, maybe some concerns that you have or some areas that you would want to push on a little bit more in terms of honoring parents?
Okay, I want to push on that one right there, the little kid one. And I want to push on that because in love, bluntly, I actually think a big part of what we're doing as parents when our children are 0 to 7 in those earlier formative years, what I said was like the cop or the commander stage of parenting. If all we are is a nurturing caregiver, but we are not an authoritative lawgiver, we are actually improperly modeling who God is to our children. He is not just their nice caregiver who always does whatever they want. God is a authoritative lawgiver who has standards of right, wrong, and holiness that we fall short of. So I would actually say one of the primary purposes of Christian parenting when your kids are 0 to 7 is for them to realize, I'm a sinner. I've broken my parents' commands and God's laws because I have a heart that God needs to change. And so if you never say no, you're really doing a vast disservice to your children. And bluntly, I want to not just tiptoe, but just cannonball into the awkward end of the deep end of the pool here. I think it's incredibly troubling the way Christian parents allow their children to talk to them at young ages. Your child under the age of 7 should never be allowed to say no to you, ever, without punishment. Why? Because that's dangerous. It's a dangerous thing for a child who doesn't know how to navigate the world to think they can without their parents. They need you to say no. Now, as you go along, as you're instructing and growing wisdom in age-appropriate ways, I think it's appropriate then to say, well, no, because, and to offer explanation with kindness. But when I see gently, I will just say I semi-regularly see children relate to their Christian parents in ways that if I would have done that when I was younger, I might not be alive today with no repercussion at all. And I think you're doing that because you think gentleness is always loving and strength is always not. But that's because you've been instructed by the culture, not by Scripture. And so you need to train that child up so that they understand that authority is good. If they can't see that in a home where they're nurtured and loved and also disciplined, then what you're training them toward, Emily, I think, is as they get older to think anyone who ever tells them no hates them. And that's just not going to go well for them in a job, in life, in anything. So one area where I have a deep concern in the age and stage of parenting is little kid parenting. I think parents need to grow backbone and spine deeply right now because the cultural messaging on early childhood is it's an abominable train wreck, to say it as lightly as I can. And if you want to know how that feels, go talk to an elementary school teacher sometime about how classroom order goes and just understand there are social repercussions for what's happening with the breakdown of family and authority structures. Okay, I'm going to throw it back to you now, though, because we're talking little kids. Both you and I have not just littles. I have no littles anymore. I have all bigs. Okay. And so now we're in like the teen stage of parenting. What do you see teen stage that you think, okay, or you're navigating through right now as a parent where you're like, this is maybe the concern point I've got as I'm looking at the macro of parenting the teen. What are some of the trends you're picking up on?
Yeah, I think that maybe it's a double-edged sword, releasing freedom a little bit too early in some areas, namely technology, communication with friends, media choices, where in some situations, I think kids are getting immersed in these like alternate worlds and ideologies and worldviews from what their parents have taught them or just God's ways. And they're sort of just getting really, really far down a rabbit hole on video games, on the things that their kids are talking about. And parents are maybe being oblivious to that, or they're ignorant, or it seems kind of harmless.
What age do you see that?
Oh,
If you were to pick an age out, because like my trend line here is, I'm like, okay, I think the substances that you're getting on your phone, the video game, whatever, it's at least as addictive as cigarettes. And we don't let you have those till you're like 18. For reasons, because you just don't possess the necessary discernment to navigate that.
Right.
So I don't know if it's 18, but I do see a kid with unfettered phone access at 12. I'm like, oh man.
Or remote, like a TV remote access of like, like our main TV that everybody watches is in our kitchen, in our main area. And like, I'm there, and now we're at the point where like there's a middle school student holding the remote, but there's always an adult circulating, and we're having conversations, and I'm coming through going, that's kind of a weird video. Don't you guys think? Like, what do you think about that? And then they're like, oh yeah, I guess that's kind of maybe not something I could watch. Well, why not? Okay, let's change it to like a better choice. And then we are talking through that conversation of, I'm viewing it more like and Brad and I still get the final say. Like we can hard say no to anything that we want. But also, I want to have a conversation and have them chime in a little bit more and start to step out and practice. What if I did give you a choice? What choice would you make? I know we've been talking about this with music choices. Like they're making their own playlists at school.
Oh, yeah.
And this kind of shocked me one day I realized, oh my goodness, you have like a world of songs you're listening to, and I don't know about every single one. But it sparked an incredible conversation because we still have authority over this. We want to know what you're listening to. We do have boundaries, but also this is a chance where you're stepping out. Let's have a conversation. What do you think makes a good thing to play on loop? Yeah, maybe you're listening to some things for fun. Is that shaping your brain at some point? So that's kind of the stage that we're in now. But I feel that tension of both wanting to give them freedom that makes me uncomfortable and then being ready to jump in when a failure is made, with also saying no.
And I think you're at that pivot where your oldest is 14 now?
7th grade, yeah.
7th grade. So when they get to 16 now and 17 now, where you're at my stage, I think what I've told parents is when they start to drive themselves independently, when that's going to begin to happen, what you're going to watch is, and it's going to feel very sad to you actually at times, is that you will cease to be actually at the center of your child's relational world. They will have other people that they look to first. They will have a very expansive world.
Wow.
Where I think if you've done it right, you are a part. You're continued that attached kind of joyful relationship of trust. My kids we have the most brilliant, wonderful conversations. But sometimes I have the conversation 3 weeks after the thing happened, and I think, oh, why didn't I know about that? And then what I realize is because you're doing the natural thing to actually move toward assertive independence. Children, once they get 16, 17, 18, are beginning to be like racehorses that need to run. And so just know as a parent, if you yank the bit back too hard, they will resent you, not trust you. And so there's an art form. The analogy Christian and I use is like a rope. You're attached to the rope. We don't want to pull the rope back. We don't want to yank on the leash. We can if we need to, but we'd actually prefer to just give you tons and tons of freedom with that. Or we have the veto card. We can play, but a wise parent training their child to have independent living, you don't slam the veto card down without realizing there's a consequence every time I play it, especially as my kid gets into their driving stage. So I think driving stage is a big place where we need to help our kids move toward assertive, wise independence. But that's with it's the beauty is they're independent but still in your home, which means they're coming back and talking. And so trying to create spaces where those conversations happen, whether it's at the dinner table, late at night when they come home, that sort of thing is wise. But I would just warn parents, beware as you get to 17, 18. If you're yanking back on, this is my rule system, your child will begin to resent you because you're treating them like they're 8 when they're 18. And they will know that, and they will feel that, and they will likely tell you that. And that will be annoying and humiliating and somewhat really helpful because they will help you navigate that. So, okay, little kids, big kids, but then I'll just say the last one here. We're looking at just areas where this sort of family breakdown thing, I do think that we often neglect the duties that we have as very old kids to our aging and dying parents. And so I don't think I want to elaborate a ton. I just simply want to say, there's got to be a better way, Emily, on a whole scale societal level in America than just saying, well, my parents have medical needs, we need to send them to a home. There are times when I understand that the needs medically can't be met inside of someone's household. I understand that. But I think we need to be doing whatever we are able to do to say, when the role flips, this person spent many years of their life wiping my bottom and doing demeaning things to care for me. I get the incredible dignified privilege to offer that care to them so long as God gives that to me. And so I just really want us to take seriously, even 1 Timothy 6, where Paul says a person who doesn't provide for his own household is worse than a heathen. That's not written about caring for your kids. It's written about caring for your widowed mom. And so we should really take seriously the idea of intergenerational care and the care and honor we get to give to our parents as actually the role of caretaker is changed over at the end. That is an honor and a privilege and a responsibility, I think, for us to contemplate seriously as children. What is that going to look like? So honor goes all the way down. Obedience, yeah, my mom in her 70s is not telling me how to make my bed anymore. But I still have duties to honor my mother all the way to the end. And we want to fulfill those things to honor the Lord. All right. Hopefully, I'm going to close it out. Guys, you watching, what a wide-ranging conversation. You got to see a picture fall in the middle of a podcast. We hear about the honor and authority structures in all society. We get to hear about parents and kids. The Fifth Commandment is expansive. And there's a ton there for us. So hopefully some of the things Emily and I got to walk through are helpful to you. And tune in next time as we unpack the 6th commandment, murder. Don't go out there killing people before the next Equip podcast. We'll see you back next time to unpack the 6th commandment.